Hi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Good evening and a very happy International Women's Day to everyone out there. My name is Hawa Shafare. I am the Executive Director at Hadarat Global in Dubai, and I'm also the CEO of Arbrix in Dubai and Training Excellence in South Africa. Jazakallah khair, Brother Ponti from the Salaamedia team for having us here today. And tonight is all about celebrating women. It's about celebrating women across the globe. It's about looking at celebrating not only those women, but also those men. And that's why one of our guests tonight, in fact, two, I'm hoping, inshallah, our male counterparts, to celebrate them as well for creating an environment that is supportive for women as well, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair to everybody who's tuned in and joined in. Please, your comments, your thoughts, your questions will be welcome. We have a team in the background who'll post your questions live. And please do interact with us. I'd like this to be a very interactive session. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'd like to be able to introduce our speakers, but also before I actually do that, what I'd like to do is talk about what exactly is tonight about. One of the topics most of you have seen out on the posters that have gone out, apart from just celebrating women, it's also about looking at some of the challenges we have experienced, but more importantly, how we have overcome those particular challenges. Being a woman myself in business across the globe, being a mum, being a daughter, it's vital that we start to look back as to how we can mentor and coach many of the other women and, of course, our male counterparts in the boardroom to be able to work closely with us. So tonight, ladies and gents, is not just about the boardroom, but it's also about managing ourselves, whether it be in our social capacity or even in our home capacity as parents in terms of navigating certain biases. So there you go. The topic of today is navigating through biases. So just a quick introduction is we rely a lot on our mental shortcuts, as you can see, to simplify the world around us. Why? Because it's easier. We go back to our past and our history of how we were brought up, and it's so much easier to look at those mental shortcuts that we have just so that we can simplify this world around us. It's easier, isn't it? So when we look at gender stereotypes, one of these shortcuts that we have, and they often lead us to make biased assumptions that women are actually disadvantaged in certain areas, for example, work, home, or our social space. So all of us who hold these biases, and at one stage, I too would have held some of them as well until we knew any better. But it's very hard to acknowledge. And I think this is what tonight is about. It's about not only celebrating women who go back and look at what were the mistakes that we made through getting to where we were. And we've got some powerful women here who's going to talk to us through that, and also steps on how to counteract that. So let's look at some of the speakers and introduce some of them who's going to be joining us here today. And I'd like to firstly welcome our speakers. Thank you for the time and the effort that you have made to be here with us. And our first speaker that I would like to introduce here today is Ms. Zahida Kara. And Ms. Zaida Kara is all in Johannesburg, South Africa. So Zahida, thank you very much for joining us here today. Zaida, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a welcome. I'm glad I can meet up with you face to face. We've always had discussions over the telephone calls, so it's good to see you up face to face. Thank you, Zaida, for joining us.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Hawa Shafare, and thanks for having me on Salaamedia. I appreciate that.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Zaida. So Zaida is actually the founder and CEO of Kaizen Continuous Improvement Systems. And I believe that you've been established for the last 16 years, Zaida. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your organization in just a short way, just before I introduce the other speakers as well.
Okay. As Hawa mentioned, I am the founder of Kaizen Continuous Improvement Systems. It has been established 16 years ago. So that's a long time ago. And in fact, the company actually assists many companies in terms of implementing quality management systems. So we speak of the International Standard of Organization, the ISO 9001 2015, the 14,000, the environmental, and then the
Wonderful.
health and safety, which is 45,000.
Good.
So
Well done. Well, welcome to the show tonight, Zaida, and we're going to get your insight later on, especially in terms of what biases you had to go through and why we are able to celebrate you here tonight. So thank you for joining us. I'd like now to introduce our next speaker who's coming on board, and that is Ms. Blessing Inakimio. Ms. Blessing is actually the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice Chair of the Strategic Women and Youth Institute, all the way joining us from the United Kingdom. Welcome, Ms. Blessing, to the session. All right, so we might be having a bit of a connective issue with Ms. Blessing. So as soon as she does join us, we will, in the meantime, introduce our next guest who's going to be joining us, and that's Ms. Cheryl Chaturvedi Jetli. Ms. Cheryl is the co-founder and managing partner of Matiti Group. And Cheryl, welcome. It's good to see you back on screen again.
Thank you, Dr. Hawa. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much. I think the lesser the said, the better. If we start to pull out our bios, I think it will take another hour.
Absolutely.
But I'm delighted to be here. I'm based in Middle East for the longest time. I call myself a global citizen. I've traveled 32 countries. And our business really focuses on various aspects of an operation, from people to technology, sustainability, cybersecurity. And I hope today in this conversation that we'll have with like-minded leaders that we will touch upon important areas on this very special day of International Women's Day to talk about areas that matter to us as leaders and be able to cite examples that help listeners and the viewers today to make informed decisions. I'll take a pause at that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to picking your brain shortly. I'd like to also introduce our next speaker, and that is Mr. Atik Mohammed. Mr. Atik, a very directed coach who I know now for the last good few months. And alhamdulillah, we're glad that Mr. Atik, you've taken out the pleasure to join us on celebrating International Women's Day today. Mr. Atik is a certified process professional. He's a licensed EFQM trainer. And you have lots underneath your biography, which I'm not going to go into right now, because tonight in particular, it's about the work that you are doing alongside many women. Every event I go to in Dubai, I know that I will be sure to meet up with Mr. Atik. He's there celebrating women as he is celebrating entrepreneurs as such. So welcome on board, Mr. Atik. Mr. Atik, if you can just double check, I think you're on mute. If you can check your sound.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Once again, yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Hawa. It's been a pleasure. And yes, it is definitely worth connecting with you and then your organization and the work you've been doing. I love to do work. For me, there is no bias between gender, between nationality, between religion, because we are primarily human beings. So whoever is good with me, I'm good with them. And even if they're not good with me, I'm still good with them. So that's my philosophy. So looking forward to a good conversation and learning from everybody. So all the very best here.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Mr. Atik, for joining us. Shall we just check one more time if Blessing has joined us from the United Kingdom? Hi, Blessing. So good to see you. Thank you very much. And as always, whenever I meet up with you, that beautiful smile that you have. So, and you've got the lovely colors of International Women's Day today. So thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. And honestly, thank you for bringing me on for this. Happy International Women's Day to you, Dr. Hawa, and to everyone else who's listening or watching. My personal style essentially is always ask, what do I have in my hands? What do I have to offer in this space? And I'm looking forward to learning from everyone else who is here and hopefully sharing a little bit of what I have as well. Thank you.
Great. So while we have you on the line, let's start off with you then, Blessing. What I'd like to actually look at, particularly from your side, is you've been very successful in your arena of both in the oil and gas sector, also in the sector of, and of course, that's a very difficult sector for women to be in. You're also part of the SWYIL group, which I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit more about, because that is in terms of strategic women and the youth leadership group. So if you can tell me a little bit from your perspective, your success as a woman entrepreneur, and forgive me, I actually should not say that, because we don't believe in women entrepreneurs, we believe in entrepreneurship. So your perspective in terms of getting to where you are as a leader, surely you've had many biases that you had to come across, and I'm sure that from your perspective, you have a lot of success stories. So can you briefly tell us about your success story in about a minute? What is your ultimate success that you've had as an entrepreneur and leader?
Okay, I would say it's in the energy space, in the oil and gas space. There's always been the notion that we're underrepresented. You know, there are not enough women, and even women are moaning that there are not enough women. There are not enough women. You know, but I would say my success would be last year, last edition we had for the event. I was able to bring on board a gender partner, and we were able to bring in a landslide representation of women from the exhibition through to the speaking to delegation. Women were represented, you know, women were everywhere, and that happened through collaboration. I think the one way that we are going to represent ourselves as women is to work together. And the bias that I'm fighting against is not the bias of gender. It's almost as though it's the bias of intergender. So where one woman thinks, because I'm older than you, therefore I know better than you, shouldn't apply anymore, especially in our culture. You know, we're women, let's support each other. It doesn't matter if a younger person comes along, and if they can do the job, push them, help them do it. You know, don't stand in the way of that woman. So I would say the greatest success has been women coming together, women of all backgrounds, women of all ages, being able to be the voice that they could listen to come together and represent ourselves in the sector. That's what I would say.
Good.
I would like to share.
I love the term that you used, and you said it is, and the term, correct me if I'm wrong, you said intergender?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you tell me, when you thought of the word intergender, or when you are looking at that, does it include, for example, industry specific as well? I've had experiences, we're busy with our Women of Stature Awards at the moment, and we know that there are women lacking in that particular sector who are even nominating themselves. So the question I need to ask you is, why intergender?
I think we keep looking outside as though the problem is external. I think the problem is internal. I think we as women, we are our own problem and we are the solution. No man is going to create the solution to a female problem. They're not women. They don't even understand it. So my perspective is, it's down to us to work out what the problem is, but don't focus on that. Focus on the solution. What do you have in your hands? What is it that you can bring to the table to make the next girl have a better opportunity than you did? I think that's my focus, and I think that's what we should focus on.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Blessing. I'm going to go over now to Cheryl. And Cheryl, if you can actually, take off from that particular perspective where you are, and you're absolutely right, Blessing, you are talking about just the problem is not outside. The problem sometimes is from within us. Now, Cheryl, you coming from a country like India, living in the Middle East for a very long time, and I know that you've established yourself exceptionally well here, and not just the IT industry, but particularly more so in the IT industry. When we talk about that the problem is from within, how would you say that is linked to the biases that you have experienced or have witnessed in your industry?
That's a very long question. So I will try and respond to it, from a professional and a personal level as well, because I think, for anybody listening in, there is, as women, as men, as whoever we want to be, we kind of live in two worlds, right? On a day-to-day basis, which is our professional hat and our personal hat. And like you rightly said, an Asian brought up in a small town in India to traveling around the world, studying, and then owning a business in a Gulf country. It's been exciting, to say the least, many learnings. But when you talk about from the context of bias, right, it's strange. In the household that I grew up, let's assume the grandmother and my mother, right? The chemistry between them, and as a young girl, when I would watch and understand how decisions were being made in the household, it was primarily based on experience. If the grandmother had more experience, no matter how right my mother was, the decision was always weighing in the side, or on the scale of my grandmother's. And I would contemplate as a young girl, what does this mean to to the end result, which is the decision being made. From that, fast forward to the girl I am, which is well traveled, well exposed to the professional biases or not. And IT, for example, has been a very male dominant, let's say, profession. And there are many studies from Harvard, from Oxford, and different parts of the world, which indicate, and which gives us figures and facts, that over the years, especially in the last 2 decades, those numbers have started to shift. Now, how have those numbers started to shift? What has been the cause of it? I think, when we, to be honest, Dr. Hawa, when I talk about biases, nobody is good or bad. We're all human, right? And I think we've come to a stage as human beings that I think it's important for us to reconsider the bias that we hold against bias itself, right?
Love it. Yes.
Nobody is immune to bias. So what can we do, right? Now, nobody is. That's human. That's innate. That bias is in our heads, right? So what can we do? I think the starting point is to become aware of it. Only then can you address it. So many societies, many organizations are living in denial. And I think that's where the problem lies, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I like the fact that when you say that we're living in denial, because you're absolutely correct when we're doing that. And I'm so happy that we actually have the other speakers on board as well. From a particular sense of living in denial, can you give me an example of one of, and Cheryl, I'm going to ask you this because you've come a long way. Like you say, we've all got our own biases within. And the first thing is about being aware of it. When was the first time you actually became aware of one of the biases that you had in relation to women in particular?
Yeah. Okay. I've had few aha moments, and there are so many of those, right? Let me share one, right? So when I was the global head of HR for a strategy consulting house, we were looking at managing team size of 15,000 across 30 countries, right? So you can imagine the diversity and the complexity of cultures and backgrounds that you're dealing with. In such a situation, you could either go very wrong or use it as an opportune moment to find where you yourself can fix your own biases. I give you an example. So we had a policy about, parents and their children, right? When the children called in sick. So let's say if a child is sick, by default, the policy has always been that the mother's number is on a speed dial, right? So, oh, the child is sick. The first number that you hit on your call is a mother's number. And, that just got us thinking that, hey, we're talking about communities and, organizations worldwide where we talk about equal responsibility, and the mother is working. She's also a bread earner. She's putting in perhaps more hours than the husband. No comparison there. But the point is they both are wearing the same hat, in which case, why should always the mother be on the speed dial? And why is it not a conversation that we offer it as an option that, hey, for your child, whose number should go on speed dial, rather than with our unconscious bias, automatically thinking that's going to be the mother. That's just one example. And that was like, oh my God, right? And the bulb went
and that's
on.
The awareness you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is just one very, very simple example, and I can go on to very complex examples, but there has to be that knowing, that awareness, and then it changes the whole context, the whole narrative.
Right. Good, wonderful. Thank you very much, Cheryl. And I think it's important. You've pointed out something really important, something so simple as whose number is on that actual immediate dial. It's as simple as that. It's what we're also teaching our kids, isn't it? Because we're setting the example. Zaida, from your perspective, Zaida, is when did you first become aware of it? And I would like you to focus on, and I know you in an industry as well, in finance and in, you know, the area where many people looks at numbers and they think, oh, well, you know, the best people with numbers, again, another bias there. But I'd like you to be able to look at it from a perspective. Have you ever come across where you've had to continuously prove yourself in the industry that you are in? And if you have, tell us how you've overcome that.
Well, that's a very interesting question, Hava. You know, going back, I'm going to go back many years ago, maybe in my mid-20s. I was a professional in the banking sector. From there, I moved to a company called the Bureau of Standards. And apparently, I was one of the first Indian females that was nominated to go into the auditing profession. And that was into...
I just want to make a note on what you've just said here. You've mentioned Indian professionals, so not just Indian. Another bias there associated, correct?
That's what I was told. I was the first Indian woman to go into the profession as an auditor, into the systems auditing. And I do recall walking onto that floor and I was told, here's a filing room. You can do this filing. And I actually raised my eyes and I looked up and I said, I came here to train as an auditor. And they said, no, you don't have the experience. You need to start with the filing first. And then I sat back and I thought, they don't know me. I'm the only female in this division amongst a whole lot of male. And I actually had a meeting with my management and I said to them, look, I did not come here to file. I came here to train as an auditor. I've come with all this financial background, right? I've got like 10 years experience already, and I'm going into a division where they're already telling me, no, we can't expose you there. You got to start here. We have someone else that we're going to train before you. And that was my starting point. And I sat down and I thought, no, this is not where I'm going to start. So I had meetings with management and I said to them, okay, this is what I need to do to get to the outcome.
And what was the outcome?
Well, I proved them wrong. So I was the first female, and maybe I should say Indian, that made sure that I get certified within 6 months from the time I started.
Wonderful.
So once that was my first step, and I remember sitting back and thinking, okay, I did this, and you know, the one morning I walked to my office, and there was a whole lot of young people in this office. They wanted to meet with me and ask me, how can I assist them to actually lead the way? You know, I felt so privileged, and I thought, if they only know what I had to go through before I got there in the 6 months, because the people in my division didn't train me, I had to find ways out of the division to actually go there and get the training.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Zaida, and I'm going to open this question out to Mr. Atik as well. So I would like to challenge you. When do you know that you're overstepping the line in terms of becoming, you know, there's a very thin line, I believe, between being assertive and being aggressive. And for us as women, and because we're going to be very polite on our beautiful radio station, we're not going to use the B and the W words. So there's a very thin line between being the B word or the W word and, of course, being assertive. So how do you know when you're overstepping that? Because I'll be honest, and why I say I'll challenge you is I have not just women, but also men that would come into an organization, and we sometimes say, right, they need to start at the starting point. And when they stand up and tell me, well, I'm not here to do that, for me, that's attitude. So the question is, with women, attitude is in addition to the fact that you are a woman. So when do you know that you're when you're overstepping that line? So Zaida, because you brought that up, I'm going to ask you that question first, and then we move to Mr. Atik, who's also managing people from a coaching perspective. So when your people come to you and ask you, then how do you manage that? So Zaida?
Going back to my experience, and I'm going to speak from my experience, I actually knew exactly where I needed to go. So I thought, there's no way I'm going to sit in a filing room, right? So I don't think I'm a very soft person. I wouldn't go out there and just be rude, but I would know a way to deal with it from a professional way. So people need to also understand that, this is you and you're here for a reason to create value. And if you're going to be misguided in the wrong way, I'll have to step in and I'll be honest to you. And I think the honesty is the most important thing. So that's the way I look at it.
So it's more about not about what you say, how you say it, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Mr. Atik, over to you. You've been coaching many women. I see you at many of our events that we have based here in Dubai as well. And when you look at women in terms of the assertiveness, in terms of coming across really strongly, where what I call executive presence, where do you think the borderline is, where women sometimes, and I use the word sometimes because I've experienced this, is that women sometimes overstep that border from a power perspective. What's your experience with that, Mr. Atik?
Let me start with a lady or a woman in my life earlier, and it's not my mother, by the way. My mother was definitely had a very key role in our, let's say, the home bring up and then all that. But then there was another lady in our family who basically was kind of an in charge of all the social aspects of the family. Now, everybody would go to her for an advice. Everybody would look up to her to lead them around. And even men, I mean, even her husband. Now, it's not the attitude, I believe. It's the capacity you have, or it's the skill you have, or it's the you have something within you which is an element of leadership.
Yes.
So it's either in both cases, men or women, this element of leadership is already in you. Now, how you reflect it is the question. I mean, it was very rightly said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So when you know that you have a skill and you can reflect it, no matter how bad you are or how good you are, I think it automatically comes out. And then it lets you lead others around. The other thing which I would probably say is stepping out of the line, or I have seen in my corporate, let's say, life, in my job functions also, I've worked with the multinationals, I've worked with the local groups, let's say. I've been in the Middle East for almost 35, 40 years. So it's very difficult to define that line, as you said. So culture-wise, if you see, it's all within the societies, and every society has their norms. How flexible or let's say tolerant they are is the question. We are lucky enough that we are in Dubai, let's say, or UAE, where norms are a lot in favor of both genders. If you look at His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's vision and policy, he promotes women in professional areas, and then he has given them those opportunities where they can sort of fit in and then prove themselves. So, yeah, it's basically the approach.
Right. So, alhamdulillah, I'm glad that you actually brought that out. And being in the UAE as well, over the last few years, we know the stance that Sheikh Mohammed has actually taken on women leadership. It's been decreed a few years ago, just before the elections, that 50% of women has to be part of that election process in terms of meeting the requirements. I just want to ask a question, and this is to all of you. Please feel free. I'm going to open up the chat now. It's, blessing from your perspective with United Kingdom, Cheryl from India, and of course UAE, and Zaida from an African perspective, being on the continent of Africa. When you look at women empowerment, or as they say, empowerment is, there's a very thin line between equality and, of course, justice. And the question I want to ask is, can women actually ask for women equality? I'm touching on a very sensitive topic here, ladies, and we have a gent to back us up. So I need your honest opinion. So Atik, please go for it.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's see, you call it universe, you call it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or whoever the God. There is already a balance in the world of 50% on each side. So we don't need to create any balance, or we don't need to look for an equality. The functions are, let's say, for example, in a household also. If the woman is, let's say, professionally a doctor, she is working and she is as equal a professional as a male doctor. So this is where our understanding should come, and then we should create that environment, giving that leverage to that lady, doctor, or wherever she is, or any other professional. There is no restriction on choosing your profession as long as you are able to create that balance in your life. In one of my let's say modules of excellence in life, there is a circle of life where we create the balance. It includes your social life, it includes your career, it includes your health, it includes your financials and all that. It's just the balance we have to create among ourselves, and then it starts all with our mindset.
I like that. I like the fact that you are talking about a balance. I know that many people who's heard me speak on previous sessions as well, I strongly believe that there is no work-life balance. But in the sense that you are talking about balance here, is that you are looking at the equality side of things. Blessing, from your side in the United Kingdom, what's your thoughts on this, especially coming from a different culture? You predominantly also coming from an African culture, but living, of course, in the United Kingdom as well. And you've got this mixed culture there, because from a perspective of equality and justice, when women say that we want equality, what does that actually mean? And how is that sometimes held against them?
I think it's in simple things like the gender pay gap. You know, you have a male and a female doing exactly the same job, and yet they're paid differently. You know, simple. If you just look at that and piece that out, as a woman, if you're given that opportunity, I'm speaking generally here, you would take on the responsibility to say, oh, I need to prove myself because I'm a woman, because already they think I can't do it. Again, depends on the environment you're in.
Yes.
So you end up giving even more and more and more and more to make sure, you know, the nurturing side of us wants to make sure the project is nurtured. It's the best it can be. You know, it's not just a case of I've gone home and I shut the books and I've finished. We carry it home with us. So to then be in a position where you find, most likely in the private sector here in the United Kingdom, where there's the pay gap, you ask yourself why. You know, what exactly is the man doing that is different from what the woman is doing that would result in the pay gap existing? You know, so it's things like that you find here in the United Kingdom. Also, with regards to some sort of jobs, they might consider, oh, what age bracket is she in? Is she likely to want to go on maternity leave? You know, things like that. You know, how would that impact the business? How would that impact the company? So it's almost as though, as a woman, you're fighting against it all the time. So you have to choose. Is either you choose the family or you choose a career. You know, if you want to have both, it's almost like you're asking for too much. You can't have it all. You know, so that's kind of where the struggle is. And a lot of us end up, when you get into the state where you start having kids and having more than one or two children, you'll have to resign, you know, and do something on your own, because it's just the construct isn't there. It's not set up for you to have both. So I think that's kind of the disparity that we have here.
So you've actually touched very nicely on one of the biases that we know very well of, and that's that maternal wall, for example, that we have, you know, being a professional woman and having children, and where you see that equality. So from your perspective, the equality that you've mentioned is very much a technical term when it comes to salaries, it comes to maternity leave, and those kind of things. What about equality in terms of industry? Cheryl, from your perspective, when it comes to the IT industry, how do you see the difference where women actually do ask for equality, or that they, you know, there isn't that equality that is being provided? How is that being celebrated today?
Yeah, I will come to that, but you know, it's very interesting what Atik mentioned and what Blessing mentioned. And if I may just add, and
Please,
you know,
please do.
I was hoping I'll have an opportunity before I lose my chain of thoughts. You know, over the years, what I've realized, and what is something that I advocate to anybody who's willing to listen and have an open and honest conversation about such a subject, is the fact that things have to stay relevant. Right now, why I bring this up is Blessing spoke about, let's say, pay gap. Right, it's become such a big deal for good reasons. Right, but if we roll back a few centuries, why did it even start? Um, in back in the day, male counterpart was considered the sole bread earner. However, the female counterpart was considered the homemaker. It was well and good at that era, right? And then how women started to get into the professional life was through part-time jobs, was filling in the gaps where male counterparts could not contribute. Or let's look at it positively. Women have some innate competencies that males do not have. We're blessed with that, right? So to bring that flavor into an organization, women were onboarded into roles. So these were not always full-time roles or permanent roles. So they got paid for the contribution that they made, perhaps in the same, let's say, for the discussion's sake, in a similar department, but not in a similar capacity as an employee. So male always had better salaries than women did. But then that became a precedent. And, we as humans, we kept evolving. Our societies, communities, organizations became more complex and evolved. But hey, our bias got stuck there that men have to be paid more and women always get paid less. So if we really start to look back and peel back layers, there is a logical reasoning why we as humans have evolved into making certain biases the way we do. So the point that I'm trying to make is, we as organizations and leaders who are, trying to change the game in our own society, in our own work fronts or industry sectors, I think it's important for us to identify where the root cause is and make that existing bias relevant to where we stand today as a community, as an organization, as an industry, right? And Atik spoke about equality, something which is very close to my heart, right? And I want to bring about a scientific paradigm to this, right? Because we do a lot of work in diversity and inclusion for organizations who are wanting to take that road. So equality and sameness, there are not two similar things. Equality
Good.
and
I'm happy
sameness
you brought this up.
Yeah, I mean, they're not part of the same equation, right? And why is that? Is because we, Dr. Hawa, you would agree, and I'm sure everybody else here in the group, we as humans were created different. I'm going back to the real roots, right? If you look at our brain's, structure, there are two co-parts, which is prefrontal cortex and amygdala. Just those two parts, if we talk about it, they are sized differently, they are wired differently, they are structured differently. So we women, we are more calm in difficult situations, I'd like to believe, than our male counterparts. Study shows
we
that.
only have one male counterpart who wouldn't dare probably go against us today.
But that's just because our prefrontal cortex is far bigger than male prefrontal cortex. And that's science. That's the way we are created. Amygdala, on the other hand, for male is bigger and women have it smaller. And that explains why, men have sometimes, more aggressive approach, more leader-like approach, more decision-making approach than women do. So, yeah, we can talk about IT, we can talk about, maternity leaves, we can talk about different sectors. But the point I'm trying to make is, we have to understand what is causing it. We have to appreciate sameness versus equality. We have to appreciate what's relevant to our current day and age. And I think if we start to look at things with that context, it will just give us a very different dimension to work on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl. You've touched on a very important point for us to actually further this discussion today. And that is particularly when you talk about sameness and you talk about equality. And like you say, they're not the same thing. So unfortunately, we had Dr. Ahmed Al-Shameli, who was supposed to join us here today, also from a government perspective in terms of working within government. in the UAE, but also looking at as a business leader. And one of the things in discussing this with him, he brought up very similar to what you just said now. He used two different words, of course. He used equality and he used justice. And there's a very thin line between what people believe is whether they're the same or not. When we talk about equality, and I'm going to touch on a topic that is sensitive to some, and perhaps maybe anyone in the group, Zaida, anyone who would like to comment on this. But looking at countries like, for example, Tanzania, who's really been phenomenal, Rwanda, who's been phenomenal in improving the status quo in government with the gender, the same in the UAE. One statistic that is standing out is that divorce rates also seem to be increasing. And the reason I bring this point up is there is a misunderstanding of equality and justice. True. And I'd like your thoughts, and Cheryl, you've put it very nicely from a scientific perspective. From a practical perspective of what you are experiencing in your environment, and we're not just talking in your work environment, but we're also talking in your home environments, in your social environments around you, what you can see. Can you tell me some of the experiences that you've had? Zaida, shall we start with you?
Thank you, Hava. Well, it's a very interesting question. And, if I think about it, some of it is also pertaining to me. When I started my company 16 years ago, the reason for leaving was because I wanted to spend more time with my firstborn baby. So the birth of my child was the birth of my company. And as we spoke about gender equality, your household life, the balance, and we as women, and when I started my business, I had to do both. So I had a little one, had to breastfeed the baby, had to work with one hand on the laptop, started the business, was very eager to do both the roles. Mm-hmm. But what I realized over time was that we needed to actually balance that off. Mm-hmm. So there was priorities in terms of work that needed to be done, and also at the same time being a wife, right? Mm-hmm. And being a mom to 3 kids. It was very, very difficult. If I go back now to my life and I look at it, it was all well worth it, because I've seen, being part of growing my children myself, I see myself in them, right? Being there for my husband, because he's also very into, his profession keeps him very busy. But also what I found was that many people looked at me when I started the business and they said, women cannot be successful. Because your role in the culture that I came from was that you needed to be home-based, you needed to be doing the cleaning, the cooking, and looking after kids, and that's what your purpose was on earth.
Right.
And I looked at myself, I looked at my mom. I grew up in a home where my dad passed on when I was 3 years old. So my mom was basically my role model. She, at that young age, I seen all the steps she took in order to be successful. And when I became a mother, I realized there's so much that she put forward to me to say she was always there. She always did everything for us. And she guided us. And I thought, this is what I want for my kids. Yes, my work is important, but my family too. So I decided to balance that off. And up to today, I'm still balancing that off.
And does balance take away of your energy in any way? Because we're constantly trying to balance things. Does it take anything away from you?
Yes, it does. Your priorities change on a day-to-day basis. There's certain things that you can do, certain things you can't do. I know that sometimes you've got to cancel some of your meetings because you can't do those meetings. There's other priorities. You maybe have an emergency with, and I know with my kids, I actually work their plans, my plans, and my husband's plans. So I have a diary to say what's everybody's plan for the week, and I try to work around that.
Okay.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's difficult, but you believe it's doable, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because you need to have a passion for what you do.
Right.
If you had
Aesthetic, from your perspective, if you had to comment on this from not just a male's perspective, but a leader and a coach, you've got quite a few people coming to you with probably lots of challenges that they're experiencing. And like we said earlier, there's that very thin line between justice in the workplace and, of course, equality. And Cheryl put it very nicely, just to recap, that there is a science behind this equality, is that we are not equal. And when women continue to have an issue, and this is our own biases, and this is why this is important, is that when we put ourselves under the pressure of saying that we are equal, how do we help them manage this particular situation, to come through the process?
Okay, let's understand, as everybody is agreeing to that there is a difference between equality and then being, let's say, rational or being just, or yeah, going back to my earlier point, the universe, or let's say Allah, has created two genders, and he has created them specifically different. Now, we as human beings, we have some commonalities, and then we have some specific skills or abilities or characteristics which are specific to us. Now, when we talk about equality, if we miss that element or this part of understanding the difference which is created by the creator, we end up into those unsolvable scenarios.
Yes.
And I personally, let's say, I mean, I deal with both male and female, even kids, and some students, teenagers. If we do not have this clarity from the beginning in our nourishment or in our development, we end up getting confused in our life. Yes. I was listening to one radio in the morning, and there they were having this Women's Day special, and there were some women who were like sort of coming up and then telling their experiences, what we are doing here actually. And one lady said that we were blessed with a father. We were only two girls, and he had that stereotype concerns from others outside from the society that you have only two daughters. I mean, you don't have a son. And then, I mean, a lot of suggestions and then, proposals and stuff and all that. And that lady said that our father stood our his grounds, and he said, I have two daughters. I'm blessed with two daughters, and I'll make sure whatever I could do for a boy, I'll do for the girls. And make them good human beings. I'll give them education. I'll let them be professional, whatever they want, and make sure that they succeed in their life with the ethics and all that. Now, and then this lady asked her, like, what was the name of your father? What's the name of father? And she said that particular person was groomed by a good mother.
There we go.
So, see, I'll tell you, the responsibility of a mother or a woman in the household is to give a better society or develop a better society. For a man, primarily, it is to support the woman to make sure that the society inside and outside is no different. Again, creating that balance. So God itself has created that balance. And if you ask me, we cannot deny that. Why? Because that mindset has not been developed from the beginning, or for some, let's say, some centuries back. Maybe a little earlier it was different. But then when these technological changes or industrial revolution started coming in, a lot more competition started, a lot more requirement of professionals was like kind of the need of the hour. And then as Zahida is in quality assurance, and I remember when I started my career, women were not into quality assurance at all. And we would take them as probably secretaries, or let's say admin staff, to do the filing and then manage the reports and stuff. But again, there are women I know who have excelled, and they are leading. I can tell you the business head of EFQM in Middle East is a lady, and there are 3 other ladies in that same organization who are running the Middle East completely, and all 3-4 ladies. So
Absolutely.
it's not necessarily that it could be men only or it could be women only, but then there are certain limitations, as I said. For example, when we do Taqdeer assessment is all about blue collar. Now, blue collar activities are not for women. Those are primarily focused for men. Now, there we know there is a limitation. So we have to understand, and in those criterias, we have what is the gender equality in the organization. And we clearly, as assessors, have to understand that there is a gap where women cannot be in the blue collar. So we have to accept that fact. So this is where we have to create our awareness, understanding, and I think mindset to change and understand what are the limitations where there cannot be equality, when there are areas where yes, we can be equal.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to put a point out there of what you've mentioned now, just something for everyone to also think about, because even when we say in the blue collar area, and blessing you're working with a lot of youth at the moment, something you might even be able to comment after this. But when we say, certain women, because of the way we are created, there's a possibility that in certain blue collar worker divisions or industries, you might not be able to find that. I want to go back and revisit that by actually saying that it's very much individual related. So it's not even about whether it's a woman or a man. It's very much individual related. I know of some women that are very heavily built, and it's mentioned that they cannot do certain things in a blue collar worker, but they are doing it even better than what certain men are doing that. So I want us to start rethinking some of the stereotypes, even that we internally have, because I had that stereotype. No, a woman won't be able to do that. She's not built that way. She can't do that. But it's very much individual based. And like Cheryl says, when we start going into our meta programs when we talk meta programs, how we've been programmed from the time we were little, that, while mom and dad are busy with doing things, and if mom needs help in the kitchen, she calls the daughter. And if dad needs help with the mechanics, he calls the son. Those are what we call programming, because we're starting to program our kids, correct? And if we want to change the biases, it's even looking at simple statements which would rationally make sense. Like, for example, certain blue-collar workers you will not experience women in. But when we start to mention that out louder and louder and louder, what we find is someone's going to break that stereotype sooner or later. And it might not be true for every woman. It might not be true for every man, but it might be true for one. And that automatically breaks that bias. Blessing, in your industry, with the youth industry particularly, you're very much involved with not just women, but the youth industry, and in a sector which is oil and gas, which is normally taboo, not just for women, but also for the youth. You've just run a phenomenal conference now where you had international people coming in from a summit perspective. You had innovators that were present. Tell me a little bit about how that bias has actually been broken in that industry, from isolating women completely and isolating the youth from that industry.
Thanks for that. It's a very interesting question. I think it's always been almost expected that when it comes to something as serious as oil and gas, the man knows what he's talking about. After all, they're the engineers. And we've always had the issue over the years that when you go up to the highest level of these organizations, you rarely find women. Again, they drop off through the years. Like we've explored, you see, you have to be technical, you have to be an engineer to be able to hold that seat. And how many female engineers do we have when you look at it from the grassroots level? How many girls are in STEM? How many girls do we encourage to go down that route? If anything, we say, okay, do the sciences, not the engineering. It's masculine, it's not a girl's job. So from the family, it starts from home, really. So we found that to change the problem, it's not just going to be a case of putting a chair at the table for a woman to sit down. We need to go down to the grassroots, from primary school, from nursery school, to start giving children the opportunity to experience STEM at that level. Because
Yes.
if they don't
Yes.
know anything about it, if their parents are not engineers, if their aunties and uncles, if they're not exposed to it, there's no
Absolutely.
chance that they're going to ever consider themselves to go down the route of engineering because they're not exposed to it. So we found that at the last summer we just finished last week, we
Yes.
brought children from secondary school in, making sure they were male and female, boys and girls. They came straight from school. They attended workshops delivered by men, delivered by women. They went around the exhibition to see that they're men and they're women, but by exposing them, just that simple act of just an
Yes.
outing to come out to an energy event.
Yes.
Already, questions are starting to ask. We challenge them with who is going to light up Africa? Who is going to
Absolutely.
create the light, the electricity? Who is going to create the renewable energy that Africa needs? Now, that question has been posed to both girls and boys.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And I think that's the change we need to make. It's not necessarily knocking it on the head to say women are not represented. We already know that. Let's start to change it for the girl that's coming
Lovely.
next.
I like that. And this is what we're getting to, is the action based. And like you said, it starts at school. And this is why we're very excited that you're going to be joining us in our summit in May, where you're bringing along some of these youth, you're bringing along some of these women. And when we talk youth, it's not just boys, we're talking about girls included in that. It's about changing that paradigm shift. And we're very excited to be able to have that. So we have some people that are already starting to post some comments, and I'm going to look at some of those comments. We have Nazira Turkey, who is saying that she's very excited to be here, ladies. Happy International Women's Day. So thank you, Nazira. Nazira, we look forward to having you join us in Dubai soon. And she also says that she absolutely agrees that she never thought of it like that. It's very thought-provoking, and she does say that we are wired differently. So Cheryl, she definitely agrees with you. And, from that perspective is that we don't feel that we give off too much of ourselves. Nazira, you're absolutely right. And I know that even from your own personal experience that you've had, that, we sometimes do give off too much. And that's something that I want to look at, from that perspective. Lerato, thank you for Ms. Blessing. She agrees with you totally. So just some comments that is coming through. Charlotte Duplessis, lovely to hear from you. Good evening, everyone. Happy International Women's Day, she says. Charlotte, happy Women's Day to you, and we look forward, and congratulations. I'm sure you're going to have a blast of an event in South Africa this coming weekend. There's those of you who don't know, there is a South African Women of Stature Awards that's taking place, and of course the Global Awards that will be taking place in May. So the runner-up and the winner of the awards in South Africa this coming Saturday is going to be joining us as a sponsor from Hadarat Global to the UAE. So we look forward to that. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for joining us as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to move on to just another form of a topic of biases, but more from a perspective of looking at the other side of the bias, not just male counterpart, not just in terms of the youth and how we brought up, but we as women, in any women that you've spoken to that have been successful, they took a lot of effort, a lot of hard work, like every other leader, for example, to get to where they are today. Have you found that women encounter discrimination early, or who have encountered discrimination, tends to have more discrimination against other women because they went through discrimination? And I see lots of heads going. Blessing, you want to go with it? You seem very, very confident on this answer. So let's go with you. How do you feel what I call this tug of war? And research and science shows that this happens a lot in your industry in particular. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how women tend to distance themselves from women who's already reached to that top because of this tug of war?
It's quite simple. It's no one helped me, therefore I'm not helping anyone. And it's just that simple. And I think that's why the movement is slow, from my opinion. I could be wrong, but in my opinion, it's that. It took everything from me to get to where I am. Why do you expect me to lend you a hand? But I think that the only way that we're going to make it together as a gender is if we work together, a collaboration. And there's this common saying that women don't work together, they don't like working together. It's a bias. I had that bias. I believed women don't work together when I first got in, and I thought I have to do it all by myself. I'm going to do it all by myself. I'll break into the world of men and I'll bring them along. I couldn't. I tried. It wasn't their problem. They didn't care about it. You know, things were going the way they wanted. I had to find women of like mind who were willing to work alongside me before I could gain any motion whatsoever.
So they do exist, right? You want to tell the audience that they do exist.
They exist. It's all in our minds. I think if you believe that I'm the only one, then you're going to be an island. But if you stop for a second and change your own bias, question yourself, come away from that mindset that there's no one else or no one wants to work with others. It's not true. There are women who are willing to give of themselves to move the agenda of women. There are. So just open up your mind and be prepared to work with others. And in the sense of working with others, you have to be flexible. Your AQ has to be on point here because you have to adapt. Strong women are strong, and they'll tell you as it is. So you have to be prepared to be flexible, give a little, take a little, and like someone said, don't give everything, just keep some back and just allow others as well some room. And I think together we can make this happen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think collaboration for me, I mean, I always say this in many of my events as well. If you break the word collaboration down, it's co-labor. There's a middle word in collaboration which says labor. And it's very much labor intensive, which means it needs work from you and others. It needs patience. You know that we as mothers sometimes, and Mr. Atik, you've had experienced this with family members, with yourself, and I'm sure your family as well, is that labor doesn't just happen. It takes long, it's prolonged. And until we have the patience and the confidence to be able to collaborate with other women, we're going to find that this will be a problem always. Sean, what's your experience with that?
Did you ask me, Hava? Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I've been listening very intently, and there are a few things that I'd like to share. So, when we speak about, for example, Blessing spoke about, kids and, their backgrounds, their bringing up, their mindset from the childhood, right? And it's all spot on. It's all absolutely correct. And to bringing it forward to, leading to a question, Hava, we have to understand and appreciate that, dealing with bias or dealing with discrimination, dealing with any challenge will always be work in progress. It's not like a degree, you certify, you receive a certificate and out you go, you're done with it. No, I think all of this is a lifelong process, right? So yes, you've learned something. Perhaps as you go along, you might have to unlearn and relearn some things, right? Because the circumstances have changed. The world has shifted. I mean, look what happened in the last 2 years, right? From a different perspective. So I think one thing that we must know is that this is not a one-off competence that you go through a book or off-the-shelf learning program and you are an expert in it. It's a lifelong process, and a good example of that is how many CEOs in the last few years have lost their jobs because of writing what they wrote on social media, right? So, they have to be taught on, understanding the biases which they very inherently, not perhaps knowing, express through their, views on these social handles, which is accessible to the world and over, right? So again, work in progress. Having said all of that, right, I think we as women leaders or, enablers or influencers, we need to walk the talk, if you ask me, right? Like we need to set the right example. If we want to see the change in the world that we wish for the world to experience, I think we need to bring it ourselves, or we can at least make a start. On that note, something that I practice myself, Hava, and the team here, is I have started to view all these biases and all the programming that we all have as an intrusion in my thoughts, which is kind of welcome now, right? I welcome this intrusion in my thoughts, and I treat it as a reminder that I have to be watchful, that I have to be relevant, and that I have to continue to learn before I start to share my opinion of matters with others.
Right.
And if I can do that, and if I can start to, bring about that change in my little circle of influence, I'm sure it will have a ripple effect. It's very underrated that how much you can do, how much you can impact, how much you can achieve as a person. I think it's phenomenal the impact you can create. To be honest, like right now, us speaking about it, if there is one listener, just one, who takes away something phenomenal from our discussion in this 1 hour and starts to bring about a change, I think this was 5 hours of our time cumulative well lived.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
let's rejoice
Well
those
done.
little wins, and that will help us achieve the grander, the bigger goal.
Well done. And Cheryl, you've just nicely summarized that. Part of it is that, we're here to celebrate our successes, but more importantly, what we are here for me is to celebrate also some of the things that we've learned along the way
Yeah.
and how we can now practice that. Because I remember when I just started my career as well, I've made many of these mistakes from a bias perspective. I had my own biases of myself as well, because I had never believed that there were certain things I could do. I mean, just running and being here as a host on a radio station, that was taboo for me, at least about 15 to 16 years ago. So we have to learn from that. And you're absolutely right, Cheryl. So thank you very much. Zaida, any comments from your side before I close off on that topic and move? And especially you've, and I think I know a little bit about you yourself. And of course, feel free to share as much as you'd like. I'm going to put you on the spot, but you've had your own share of biases in terms of experiences where collaboration with women never worked out. And of course, there were times that you actually had to pull back on that. Can you tell us what you've learned from the experience in particular and what you believe you could actually share with others to be able to take away with them today, especially on a collaboration perspective with women when it comes to us with this tug of war of holding back? I think you're on mute, Zaida. There we go. Now we can hear you.
Well, Hava, maybe coming to your question, and also with regards to my view, I know starting a business was very difficult, being female-owned, being maybe Indian as well, and coming out into the real world. In my profession, it's a more male-dominated when it comes to quality systems, the health and safety environment, the 14,000 as well. And what I found there was that we didn't find too many women that we could work with, that could understand, this is where we come from, this is our knowledge, this is my experience, that is my expertise. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very difficult when it comes to collaborating, or maybe my experience as a female being in a total different field where I can walk into a factory, right? I got to wear all the PPE requirements in the male dominating world, and I got to go in and tell them, but this is what you need to do.
Right.
Okay. I found that to be difficult initially, but as time went on, I think, like you said, we learned from experience, and I'm actually in a space of my life where I can walk into any company and I could actually sit on those board of directors and I can guide them through systems with all my experience.
I love the I can do attitude here, yeah? Well
yes,
done.
I can do that. And I know that being in that male-dominating world, I've also picked up over the years, I've learned a lot. I've learned people. I've learned different companies. You must remember my work is surrounded with going into various sectors. I can go into a financial sector. I'll have to fit my mind. I'll put my cap on for the financial side. I've got to go into a manufacturing side, put the cap on, the red cap on for that. Then with the yellow cap for something else. And what I found was that the passion that you have for what you really, really like doing, you should not stop yourself from going there, irrespective of all those block roads that you would hit. What I've also learned about those block roads is that that's the only way you're going to learn. If you hit those dives or downs, being an entrepreneur is being on a roller coaster ride. And You only learn when you learn once you hit those tips. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just before I go to Mr. Atik for a comment on this as well is, I remember many years ago, and I won't give away my age, but of course we're talking about almost 30 years ago, when I was in the banking industry and I decided to actually leave to start my own company. And many people came to me because it was at that point in time that I also went on pilgrimage and I went for Hajj. And those of you who knew me about more than 30 years ago, you'll know that I wasn't this, let's put the word, I used to wear a shela, I used to be very modern, I used to have my hair loose, and of course it was a learning process for me. And it's when I went to pilgrimage, I decided that, and I went for Hajj, and I decided, Alhamdulillah, I'm now going to wear a scarf and I'm going to wear a shela. And there were so many people who were with me because it is at that point that I was almost at my peak of my career as well. They came to say, Howard, don't do this. You're going to lose respect in the business world. You're going to lose respect in the Western world and the Western culture. People won't know how to react and respond to you. So it's those kind of challenges that made me want to do it even more. And when I actually went for Hajj, Alhamdulillah, 7 weeks later, that time we could go for Hajj for 8 weeks in a row. And Alhamdulillah, I went with my family. And when I got back, I immediately went into hijab and I immediately started wearing that. And the amazing thing is it was completely the reverse. The attention I got, people wanted to know, for example, because I was in South Africa and at that time, wearing hijab in a corporate environment was kind of taboo. And people wanted to know from me, what does it mean? What is the relevance of not showing your hair in public? It was more information. And once they got to know, because I started to have to learn that, I needed to go back to the scriptures because I needed to understand why do women wear hijab. It wasn't any longer about, the fact that I was told to do so because of my parents and you grow up. Now I needed to understand the actual reasons. So I studied, I developed, and in doing that, I started developing others, and the respect I got was phenomenal. And when I went into business, the same company that I'd left became one of my biggest clients as my first client as I went into business because of the respect and the kind of gratitude for learning from me. So the challenge is out there, ladies and gents. Anything when somebody says there's a naysayer out there, look at it as a challenge, as long as, like Mr. Atik says, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So Mr. Atik, your comment, and then we'll also look at some of the comments that are coming up on screen.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all about, I'm listening, mashallah, I mean, very, very, let's say, powerful messages from all 3-4 of you. Just I'm telling you from my experience. So just take a situation where a woman is challenged by a man and a woman is challenged by a woman. Which scenario do you think is more complicated?
Challenged by a woman.
So, exactly. So this is I have seen in my life many a times when a woman is challenged.
Why do you think that is so? Why?
If you ask me, in my personal own view, I might be wrong, but then with all due respects to all of us here, I think there is, let's say, a connection, a rivalry between women, which is unsaid kind of a thing. And they don't speak about it and they don't say about it, but then they have it within themselves. And knowingly, they can accept a challenge from a man because they know they can prove him wrong. But then it is a little bit sensitive when it comes to a woman against a woman. Now, I don't know the psyche behind that. I don't know the rationale behind it. And I am, with all my, let's say, declarations, I'm unable to solve that.
Yeah.
So that's something beyond. So I think they have to understand or they have to rationalize it among themselves. But it's a fact. It's a fact that if it comes to comparison between the two, definitely women versus women is a challenge for themselves itself. But at the end, if you understand let's say the purpose behind your intention or the purpose behind the intention of the other counterpart, things can get better. And there have been some cases where I could make a difference by explaining the situations to them and then understanding. So I think one of the parties have to leverage down a little bit and then try to understand the situation, and then it will work out. However, men also have rivalry, but men do not have that sensitiveness or sensitivity in their rivalry. They over a period of time, they, let's say, put it to the dusters, and then that's it. That's it.
Mr. Atik, I'm glad that you've actually brought this topic up, especially under the concept of a tug of war, which is one of the biases in particular. And before I share my experiences, we had Cheryl and Blessing, who was nodding and conferring. What are your thoughts, Cheryl, on this particular sensitive topic that Atik has actually brought up?
I was having a hearty laugh when you're talking about it. Because what's there that can't be solved, right? And no matter how complex the situation is, I think we are equipped to deal with it, right? Do women find confrontation with a woman harder to respond to than a male? I think psychologically that's correct, right? And then there are many different ways in which we can peel this, right? From let's say scientific level, from personal experience level, from societal level, from peer pressure level, from organizational culture level. And by bringing these layers, I'm hoping we are already getting to the answer, right? Because when you look at Atik and everybody else present here, when you look at a situation from a different lens, from a different context, the way you deal with it, the solution to the problem changes, right? Now, are we looking at women fighting, or not fighting, that's a strong word, women confronting or not being collaborative with women, let's say in a specific geography? Then the reason and the solution to that is very different than in an organization which culturally has an environment where women do not find it conducive to work with another woman. Because then the rationale, the logic, the proposed solution, the approach to mitigating such a challenge is very, very different. So I think there is no cookie cutter approach to this, if I may say this,
Absolutely.
right? I think it will depend on where the situation is happening, to who it is happening, what is their background, understanding the whole context, the parameters which are aggravating or alleviating the situation, and then perhaps come up with a conducive solution. That's how I would approach it.
Fantastic.
Thank
you, Cheryl.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and
Wonderful.
if it's a closing remarks on
Please,
this subject,
please do.
I literally practice, and I'm not preaching here. I even said it as a winning remark in the crown I recently won. Is we as women, right? We need to fix each other's crown without the world knowing that it was crooked. And I literally live by this saying. And I think, if again, going back to what I said a few minutes back, if one of us can do it, a lot of us can do it, and that's where the change begins. So
I love it, Cheryl. And I think that is an absolute lovely way to put it. I've learned from that, and the way I practice that, if I can add in, I just did this maybe about a week and a half ago. Mr. Atik, you were also present at one of the events. There was somebody that I knew had a bit of a conflict. And the only way I can manage this is to go head on with it, and to go head on and actually say, look, there's a possibility that I might have come across in this particular manner, and I apologize if I did. It was done unknowingly. So we spoke about this right from the beginning, and that was in terms of being aware of it. The first step is become aware of when we are doing it, because we all do this. As a higher position that we get, it even gets worse. The higher you get in your positions, it does get worse. So become more aware of it, and once you're aware of it, look at finding out how you're going to fix it. Just before I go to Blessing and we take some comments from the audience as well, Cheryl, just briefly tell us a little bit about your crown that you've just won, because that's celebrating the women here today. And I don't think the audience knows about your crown. Not all of them does. Firstly, congratulations. Just tell us a little bit about that.
It would be hard to summarize it very briefly, but let's do a crash course in this. So, everyone, I'm delighted. I won the Mrs. UAE International Pageant here in Dubai in December 2021. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Is that something that I planned for? Was that in my vision board for 2021, 22? No. I think it's about gracefully accepting the challenge and emerging on top. That's really what happened. I had a very, very bad health scare mid last year, which resulted in a very complex and a very cruel surgery for 9 hours. Very, very long recovery period. But when I look back at it, and something that Hawa touched upon a while back, I think challenges are posed to us to help us finish a learning, to help us emerge stronger. And I think we all have had our shares of challenges in life, I'm sure. I have never so far come about a challenge as difficult as that which I faced last year, so gracefully, so peacefully, and so emotionally resilient as I did. So I think in my life, I've turned a page when it comes to managing challenges, when it comes to handling an adversity in life. And I think that for me is a blessing and a learning that I will cherish for how many ever years I live. What that brought me home was a crown, which I hope to share with you. It's in a different place today, but it was not about winning. It was not about being better. It wasn't about proving anything to anybody, but me trying to, let's say, reclaim my own integrity, reclaim my own sanity, having gone through what I'd gone through. I have to be honest, I'm a human. So, I was in a victim mode for many weeks. I felt my life was coming to an end. It literally felt like that. And, I was like, maybe it's time to say grace, but life had a different plan. And I'm proud that I could stand up to the situation. And on top of that, come back home with a crown. So yeah, thank you. And I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
And we are very proud of you as well, Cheryl. Well done. Congratulations. And there's two words that you mentioned here is one, there's a time that you do fall victim. And that's a reminder to every single one of us here today is that allow ourselves to become vulnerable because we are human, right? We're not angels. We are not made out of anything besides what the Almighty has created us from. And if emotions wasn't valid, then our Almighty would not have created us with emotions. So we need to feel it, become vulnerable, number one. And once you do, the second word that you use, which really stands high up in my mind, is reclaim yourself back. Go back to reclaim who you are, reclaim what is really possible. And I think, not very long after your ordeal that you went into, you went up there on stage and you reclaimed yourself, and the world saw you for truly who you were. So once again, congratulations, Cheryl, and we all support you very much here in the UAE. So thank you very much for that. So as we're taking up some chats, there's a lot of chats that are coming up on the screen. So as we're seeing that, we see that again, we have Nazira, thank you very much. You're nice and active today. Well done. Absolutely. They did not, they not kind and understanding. They forgot how hard it was from them to get there. Blessing, you're absolutely right. So we're talking here about the collaboration. Good point, based on the collaboration where people don't know how hard it was to get there. And I think the biggest point of when people think it's so hard to get there, that's when women sometimes misses the point, because they actually then say, hang on, I took so long, I did this to get here, why do I need to make it so easy for you? And I think that's something that we need to look at. They like being first and they need to work side by side, and they need a shift that bias as well. And you're absolutely right. And for me, that shift in bias, the most important part of that shift in bias is about learning to be confident with who you truly are. Because when you're confident with who you truly are, it doesn't matter what space you are in, there should be no competition. Because why? You are confident with who you are and what you can do. then the competition becomes collaboration. But when you are not confident in that space yourself, we need to look within us before we even look at what we see as competition. So Nasira Turki, thank you very much for that. And Zaida, I see you nodding as well. Ladies, gents, we have about 5 minutes to be able to close off the show this evening. So I want to end off with a huge bang. And that is in terms of we celebrating International Women's Day. What is it that you would like to celebrate for who you are right now today? I would like each of you to take about a minute to celebrate and leave a lasting message for our audience here tonight. So shall we start with our rose amongst the thorns, or shall we say with the thorn amongst the rose? Mr. Etik, shall we go with you? If you had to celebrate women internationally, but also I'm going to turn the surroundings. Today for me, it's not just about celebrating International Women's Day. It's about celebrating every leader who creates a space and an environment which allows for us to be able to be celebrated. So Mr. Etik, I'm going to start with you. With your permission, of course. If you feel you want to hold it until the end, we can wait until the end.
Perfectly fine. I mean, if you have seen my post, I think the only empowerment initiative what we can give to women is respect. And if we give them the respect as they are our wives, as they are our mothers, as they are our sisters, and every walk of life. I mean, we have had, let's say, businesswomen in Islamic history. The mother Khadija was, mashallah, the best businessman we could think of. We have had examples of Mother Teresa as a leader of women helping societies. So there are many examples around us where we have women who have proven themselves. And now that's what I say. If we give them respect, that respect will again come back in nurturing the society. And then they are actually respectable contributors along with men to develop our societies with that balance what we need in our lives. So that's the celebration probably from my side. And I salute all women, including my wife, my mother, my siblings, my sisters, cousins. Everybody has contributed their part in my growth as well. I mean, I'm still learning from my nieces. There is a niece of mine who just did graduation, and then I was just conversing with her, and there were a few things she mentioned. I said, "Oh, really? We haven't thought about this in our lives, or our parents haven't thought about it. So let's start working on that." So there are things where we still learn, and then they're as equally blessed and individuals, human beings, as men. So I think we'll have to respect that for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Etik. Really appreciate that. And we celebrate you as well. And me personally, I've got to know you on a personal level on various sessions. And I see that you always at events, supporting women events, and you sometimes might be the only man in the event, but you are. So we want to say thank you very much for that. And thank you for being there in support of us. Blessing, shall we go? Sorry,
you can schedule 22nd of November. That's the Men's Day, because people don't know about that.
Definitely, we'll do a celebration on that day too.
I hope we can have one day which we can call the human day or humanity day. We don't have all these biases and differences. So thank you very much, ladies. I'm honored to be part of this forum and then share my thoughts. And thank you very much for the evening.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Mr. Etik. Blessing, over to you. In a short while, what would you like to celebrate today?
I would like to celebrate I am. If all of us can focus on the I that I am, and deal with our own biases. Imagine if everyone dealt with their own bias. There'll be no bias to deal with. So wonderful. Let's look inwards. Let's look in the mirror. Let's sort out who I am. Let's sort out what my biases are. Because if I can get rid of my bias, I wouldn't see any other bias, and there'll be nothing.
Lovely.
There'll be no obstruction. So if I believe I can do it, I will. I'm not going to focus on, but they wouldn't let me. Yes. Let's focus on the I am. Deal with our own biases. I think that's what I'd like to celebrate today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Blessing. It was an honor to have you here today. Zaida, what would you like to celebrate today?
Okay. Thank you for that, Ava, once again, and the team. I want to take time to recognize each and every woman on this universe on International Women's Day. I know each and every one is special, and also with regards to everything that they put in to get to the outcome. So even if you fail, you're still a winner. And all the small things that you also achieve, your self-confidence, things that motivates you, you're the winner. And happy International Women's Day to all.
Fantastic. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Zaida. And we look forward to welcoming you to Dubai soon. Thank you so much. Cheryl?
Yeah,
what would you like to celebrate?
sure. My summary of our discussion, or what I celebrate, is the now, the present. Yeah, there is so much that needs to be forgotten from the past, if not learned from, and there's so much that we have to go achieve in the future, and there's so much to be done. But let's take a moment to pause. Let's take a moment to internalize. Let's take a moment to celebrate the now, because it's in the now that we live the life. And we keep, rubbing in the past or worrying about the future. We lose the plot in the now, right? And, we as women, and because this is International Women's Day, I really want to leave this parting thought for all of us, and for men as well. We all love looking at the rainbows, right? Don't we? They're beautiful, they're colorful, but there is a process that leads to the rainbow, which is a beautiful, if not excessive, downpour or a rain, right? So, if you want to enjoy the rainbow, you have to put up with the rain. And in this analogy, let's use this rain as a change, as thank you, as a challenge, as an obstacle, or as whatever you want to put the analogy to. Just know when you overcome that, there is a rainbow waiting for you on the other side. So let's approach life with that, and enjoy the present. Of course, work towards the future. Let's not forget the past for sure. And I'm sure we'll be in for a beautiful surprise. So thank you so much again, Dr. Hawa, and everybody else in the panel today. Thanks, Salaamedia, for this opportunity. I know it's very late for you, Zahida. It's almost past dinner for us. I'm sure it's dinner time for Blessing. So thank you all for making the time. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Cheryl. We really appreciate it. And ladies and gents, I want to leave you with two thoughts, because I think this group just summarized it so well for me that I don't need to say much more. But for me, my life partner, my business partner, and the man that I hold very close to me is my spouse, and he's my business partner as well. But there's something that he lives by, and a philosophy that he lives by, which I 100% look at it from internally. And he says that we can live our life where we see our hearts at peace, or our hearts at war. And depending on how we are, if our hearts are at peace, we will react to every situation at peace, because our hearts are at peace. It's where we are. And if our hearts are at war, the slightest thing that might go wrong, we're going to react, excuse me, in a very negative perspective. So we need to work harder on getting our hearts at peace from internally, and then nothing that happens in your life will be to your disadvantage, because we can then only learn from it, because our antennas are out to learn. So I want to end off with saying what I always say at most of my talks, is that we cannot become ourselves by ourselves. I strongly believe that you can't. We need to go out of our way to support each other. We need to be able to be mirrored. We need to be able to be emulated. And as we are doing today, celebrated, because as we are truly who we are is what makes the difference. Who you are is what makes the difference. So my advice and my way forward is to live life as being totally, consciously purposeful. And if we can do that, then we can move forward from any situation. Ladies and gents, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Salaamedia for this opportunity and to thank the background technical team. Thank you very much. All the technical guys who made sure that we're online on time. Our sound is working, our vision is working. And then also a very good thank you to all our speakers, Cheryl, Blessing, Mr. Atik, Zaida. I look forward to welcoming you all to our event soon. And to those of you, Blessing and Zaida, who's not yet in the UAE, we really look forward. We're going to lay out the red carpet for you, so we look forward to seeing you soon. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time and your support. And inshallah, we will keep in touch. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good night. Assalamu alaikum to everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice
Thank
evening.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.